Hello, everyone. Lovely to see you, even though I really can't see you, but I know you're there, and just hoping you are ready for a validation skills reboot this evening. I wanted to start tonight by practicing my own validation skills on all of you. Just the fact that you took Family Connections and you are here doing a skills reboot says everything I need to know about how much you care about yourselves and your person. Showing up is half the battle, and sometimes more than half the battle. Just ask Roger. And I want you to each, practice self-validation and tell yourselves what a caring, dedicated family member you are to have shown up here tonight. So kudos to you all. So I will introduce myself and Roger. We are your co-hosts for tonight. I'm Nancy Epstein, one of 2 leader liaisons with Family Connections. And what does a leader liaison do? We help train and support all of our amazing volunteers who lead Family Connections. Some of you are leaders, and all of you have had leaders. And I just want you to know that they are all volunteers. I'm also a family member and an experienced Family Connections leader. I've led 12 Family Connections courses over the past 4 years. And as a family member, I get practice every day, opportunities to practice every day. All of my skills. So I am in need of a reboot myself. My co-host tonight is Roger Fignar. He is also a family member and an experienced Family Connections leader. Roger and I, along with his wife, Marie, have co-led many courses together. So tonight is a little like old home week for us. I also want to remind you, or maybe you didn't know, or maybe you did, that Doreen Dawson, the other Family Connections leader liaison, and Tina Moore, our Family Connections coordinator, did a Skillful Life webinar last month on validation role play. Roger and I will be doing one role play tonight, and I encourage you to watch Doreen and Tina's webinar for many more role plays illustrating different situations and relationships. It will be a really great companion to what we're covering tonight. And then Tina, maybe you can tell us how they can access that recording if they weren't registered. You can do that now or later. It's up to you.
Okay. They can actually just send me an email and we can send them a link. So it's Tina. I'm going to put my email in the chat, and then you can just send me an email and we'll send it to you. Okay.
Great. And speaking of chat, you may put your questions, comments in the chat box, and Tina will ask them on your behalf at the appropriate time. And we will also answer questions at the end. So Tina, feel free to break in and ask people's questions or comments as you see fit. Okay.
All right. You got it.
So good. So Roger, are we ready?
I think so. Have we started recording? Have we started recording yet?
We have. Thank you so
Awesome.
much for reminding me. I appreciate that.
No problem. I'll let someone else watch the chat. I see some coming in already, so that's good. We want to be engaged with everybody. And we want to talk about validation. And I saw one post on the Facebook group earlier today that said this was coming at a good time for them. So hopefully you're not the only one that thinks this is at a good time, because I think it's a good time for everybody, right? So what is validation? We're going to talk a little bit about what it is and maybe even what it isn't, right? So that is some of what we will do today. So what is it? And once again, this is a reboot. So you've all been through this material before, and it'll be a really good review. And if something's confusing, now's a great time to get in there with questions as we go through. So, validation is a response, our response, that identifies and communicates our understanding of what another person is saying or feeling in a clear way. And I for one love the acronyms, right? Communicate, legitimize, empathize, acknowledge, and respect. We've shown various videos during the classes that you've participated in, maybe as homework, maybe during the class, but you've seen some concepts of this. But what does it mean, right? To communicate openly what you understand, legitimize of facts of another's response, right? So there's some key words in here. Communicate what you understand, legitimize the facts of another's response. Those are very important to keep, some of the words in here. Empathize, and then explain your own feelings. Empathy is one thing. This is really more the communication of empathy, though, right? We've talked about that a few times, and we will talk about that more as we go this evening. Acknowledge the situation, feelings, and opinions. Respect the other's feelings, reactions, goals, and emotions, right? So respect, I think, is key to any interaction, even if it's someone you disagree with or something that you disagree with that's happening. The respect is very important. Acknowledging their situation, empathy. If you communicate and you legitimize their emotion or their response, it automatically helps, right? Legitimizing someone else's feelings and emotions helps them no matter what, right? So just being that, even if you can get to the first couple layers here, the C and the L even, that's going to help move things forward and not make things worse. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the old transactional model here. We go into a little bit more detail because this is really what validation helps with, right? How your interactions go amongst people. So if person A and person B, right, you and your loved one are in kind of a cycle that seems negative, validation and non-judgment, that benign interpretation we all talk about, can really help to help the relationship move forward. So that is just a very simple slide to show that interactions are reciprocal. Our next slide is a little more detailed, and we'll spend some more time here on this one because it's a cycle, right? It moves forward, hopefully, right? You move your relationships forward. So when we're dealing with someone specifically with borderline personality disorder, they already come in with their emotional vulnerabilities, right? We start here, people, that's kind of the what we see, right? We see the high emotions, up and downs, and just their background being vulnerable, sensitive, the slow return to baseline, those kind of the list of issues or items that go along with BPD, right? And that automatically kind of gives them the status of heightened emotional arousal, right? So that is just kind of where they start. And then if an event happens and they're already kind of high up on the emotional scale, they're upregulated. And some people might start off down here. Our loved ones are already here, and if something happens, they jump quickly, right? And they quickly go higher on the emotional arousal scale. So an event happens, and then they're already in this state, possibly due to previous, and that leads to the inaccurate expression. Hoping not to trigger anything here, but that can be any number of things, right? It can be the binging and purging. It can be the cutting, self-harm. Those types of things are inaccurate expressions of emotion. And that's one of the things we really want to try to avoid, right? That is a whole nother level that we want to try to avoid. And those inaccurate expressions turn to us giving an invalidating response because we're afraid, we jump, we act out of our secondary emotion a lot of times, where it might be fear, but we automatically get angry. So we want to try to avoid those things by participating in the validation, right? We want to get better at validating so that we can avoid the big red box up here of the pervasive history of invalidating responses. If we can turn invalidating responses into validating responses at any spot along the continuum here, hopefully we can break this part of the cycle, which then lowers the emotional vulnerability, the heightened emotional arousal, and everything gets better, right? If we can do the validation. And as you can see, the judgments play a big part. So we can keep the judgments out of our responses, stick to those facts again, and hopefully that gets rid of some of the dysregulated behavior and also helps us understand our loved ones a little better, right? The whole gamut of benefits if we can reduce our judgments and be more validating. So that's kind of why we want to keep studying validation and keep practicing, right? You can study it a lot, but you have to practice too. So we also get opportunities to practice, sometimes more than we want to. And that ultimately will help us and our loved ones as we move forward in life. So why is it important? Obviously, we want to maintain our relationship. It's someone we love, and we want to show that we value that relationship. We want to prove through our words and actions both, right? Validation doesn't have to just be words. It can be actions too. That's something to keep in mind. It can be your words. It can be your tone of voice. It can be behaviors. Modeling behavior helps validate as well. So we want to make sure that we're building on that validation. So validation is the core of our communication. If we respond to someone and they feel it's not validating or that it's just a brush off, then the communication kind of shuts down. There's a barrier there to the communication. So it builds trust. It does slow the reactivity, right? It's automatically disarming. We talk more about that as we go. It reduces anger and judgments on our loved one's part, as well as our own. It enhances our own self-respect and the self-respect of our loved ones. It really is the key to getting through the tough spots, right? If we can get that non-judgmental response, if we can get that validating response, automatically it's going to be easier to kind of smooth out the rough patches. They're still going to be there, right? We don't want to pretend that issues won't always exist or won't exist on some level, but they will get better. And then increased positivity. Who doesn't want a better relationship with everybody in their lives, right? So if you can do the validation, it's going to help all aspects of that relationship with a challenging loved one, let's say, or with just anybody that we interact with on a regular basis. And then it gets to the problem solving, right? That's what we all want to skip to. We just want to solve the problem right away. But if we can validate, we can get to the problem solving faster, right? And it helps that we get to that spot quicker. So what do we validate, right? We validate as much as we can. So feelings and emotions, obviously, there's always truth to the feelings and emotions, even if we might not see it from the perspective of the person that we're dealing with. We can see that there is some, there's legitimacy to their fear. There's legitimacy to some anger, disappointment, sadness. There can be legitimate emotions, right? If someone dies, grief and sadness is absolutely a legitimate emotion. So we want to make sure that we validate the valid there. So a feeling or emotion can be validated, even though it might seem like someone's in a crisis or something's happening badly. Legitimacy of wanting something. We all have things that we want, right? We all have wishes and desires, and we all want maybe a better life for our kids, and our kids want a better life for themselves. they might have dreams and beliefs about things that are totally consistent with who they are, or they might have dreams that are a little above, but we want to validate the legitimacy of the needs and the wants, right? Beliefs, opinions, or thoughts, right? That's one huge thing that I had to learn the first few times through this class, both as a participant and as a leader, is there's no one absolute truth when it comes to the behaviors and the feelings and the thoughts, right? So that's something that was a little bit challenging for me, right? Math, 2 + 2 is 4, and every time, right? Or at least pretty much every time. So it's a challenging topic sometimes to realize that there can be two sides to a story, and both can be true. So true values, obviously, is something that truth is something to validate. How difficult something is. Our daughter's having a hard time finding a job right now. It's everything in the news is everybody's hiring, and she's having a hard time. So yeah, yes, it can be hard to find a job. Right? That is definitely a difficult thing. Something else, how hard a person's trying to do something, right? We see her making effort to get a job. So that's something that we can validate. Absolutely. And then things that someone does that are effective. She's getting along with people that she lives with better than she has in the past. So that's something else that we can validate. She's making effort. She's trying to learn how to get along with others better. So we can do that. And then just efforts made, even if it doesn't make a lot of progress or we don't see a lot of progress, we can validate efforts made towards those things. Next one's a little chart here about how, what, and why that of validation, and a few of the phrases that we use. And I think everybody here has access to the sheet of validating responses, which there are quite a few, but these 4 are very handy, right? These 4 here, very, very handy to communicate and why and how. Okay? So the what is just, I get it. That it communicates your acknowledgement, right? You don't necessarily have to agree, but when you say, I get it, you're acknowledging their experience can be legitimate. So you're checking for understanding. You can ask questions. I understand that you are hurting right now, or I understand that you were tempted to get drunk last night, whatever it happens to be. There's legitimacy to their feeling. So you're feeling sad, you're feeling upset. Tell me what happened. That's a validating response, right? Because it shows that you care, because you're asking a question to be involved. So that is a really good one. The what happened. Tell me what happened. Tell me more about. That's a very validating response, because it didn't agree. It didn't say, oh my gosh, I can't believe you did that. It is just a clarifying question, and you care when you ask questions to get someone to open up to you. The of course, it makes sense that you feel that way. It's perfectly normal to feel upset when your friends cancel on you. It's perfectly normal to be upset when your friends call you names. You know, all those things are legitimate, and it makes it feel more normal for them. My daughter's asked me questions. It's like, is that normal? It's like, yes. The answer is yes every time. Because that makes her feel, a little better. And it is. The things that she was talking to me about most recently is like, I'm getting older. I don't want my birthday to come this year again. And she's not old by any means, but is it normal to not want your birthday? Yes, absolutely. Yeah. For some of us, it's very normal to not want your birthday to come. So be open to that, of course. And it makes sense that you feel that way. The me too. A little bit more careful with this one, because it can come off as, oh, your problem's not that big a deal. I've been there before. But it is very good to be kind of in the trenches with someone. It's that empathy, get down in the hole with somebody instead of asking them if you want to go get a sandwich. The one video, right? So it's a shared vulnerability and connection, and your experiences too can be shared, and you can communicate that you really are there with them too. So I'm scared too, those types of things, or if I had a bad day at work, I want to get drunk too, those types of things are communicating without sounding almost patronizing, right? The I'm here, the last one on the list here, it just shows that you're accepting and understanding of them, or at least you're trying to be understanding. So just a hug can be validating, right? Or sitting there quietly. You can ask the question, do you want to tell me more about it now, or is now not a good time? That's a validating response, right? Because that's the allowing space when it's needed. And then just being there quietly, sitting, feeling the feelings, right? If they're sad, just feel the feelings with them, be there for them. It just be there as a listening board, or just sit silently sometimes too. So that is a very pretty handy chart. So I'll give one example. Sometimes you can't make this stuff up, right? Got a really good example just this past week. My daughter's boyfriend, she actually asked us about how to handle a situation. Our daughter is our BPD loved one. And she asked us about validating, because her boyfriend, his hair is starting to fall out, right? He's very young. He's only 20. And he's losing his hair, but it's runs in the genes at times. And he's very self-conscious about it. So she told us, yep, I've been and this was in the car, literally on the way to Thanksgiving dinner at my wife's grandma's house. So we were on the road, and she's all, yep, I've been trying to validate. I tell him, it doesn't matter, I love you anyway. And my wife and I were like, no, that is not validating, right? That's not a validating statement, because that is just, kind of making it seem like his feelings don't matter. It's like, well, I love you anyway, so what does it matter? So we went through a nice, probably 10-15 minute exercise in the car about validating responses she can give, right? Oh, that sounds hard, tell me more, right? And how do you feel, and why do you feel this way? Or not why, but the help me out here, Nancy. I gave up a good example yesterday.
Of course, you'd be upset that your hair is falling out.
Of course, yes. Thank you.
Who wouldn't be upset at that?
Yep. You're only 20. It's normal to feel that way, right?
Mm-hmm.
Communicating those things. So yes.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a really good opportunity, and that was, not a child. That's her boyfriend. So it's her loved one, and he doesn't have BPD, but she thought she was being validating, and she was being the opposite, right? So that was a really good opportunity for us to give that teaching moment. So that was another little example. Are there any questions we need to deal with at the moment, or are we good to go?
Nancy, you want to take a look in the Q&A?
Okay.
Sure, I will take a look. Let's see. I don't think I'm seeing the question you're seeing, though.
Okay. Oh, any tips on how to validate when you are estranged and only communication is text or emails that may or not be returned?
I have an idea about that.
Yep. Nancy's an expert in text messaging.
Yeah, and you may have ideas too, Roger. I would say that you can validate her. I understand you don't want to communicate with us now, right? You do understand that she doesn't want to communicate. I don't know the reasons behind it. And I'd still like to send you a postcard and tell you I'm thinking about you. Is that okay? And that way you're validating, yes, okay, she hears me that I'm estranged, and she's asking my permission to just send it a postcard when she's thinking of me. And then she can say, no, don't ever do that, or okay, send a postcard if it makes you feel better. And when you do that, don't ask for anything in return. Just make some statements that you want to make, but don't ask for anything in return.
I see Tina typing an answer to the next question. And then how do you validate in order to de-escalate when it's something that is not valid. Our loved one is, the example is our loved one is being verbally and or physically abusive, or if they make a poor decision and they are unhappy with the natural consequences. That's a pretty common one, I would say. There's always something valid about the experience, right? If they're being verbally and physically abusive, you can observe your limit, which we'll get into more later, of not being present with the person, or you can say, I see you're really upset with me right now. That may get a good response. It may not be, but that is one. I see that you're very upset with me right now. Maybe we need some time, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, an hour, 2 hours apart. We have done that before with my daughter, right? We need 2 hours, come back to us. So it's very difficult. And they often are unhappy with natural consequences. And that part is a normal thing, right? We know you're not usually.
Validate. Yeah. And you can validate their unhappiness with the natural consequences. My daughter lost her license because she got too many tickets. Natural consequence. I can validate how difficult her life is not being able to drive. I can validate how frustrated and upset she is at not being able to drive. And so you see, I didn't validate her getting the tickets, but I validated her discomfort at the natural consequences. And I think you can even validate how hard it is to have a hangover. Yeah, I see you're really suffering from that hangover today. That's rough. You want a glass of water? So that's one way you can do it.
All right, I have another question for both of you, because I think this comes up a lot. All right, let's say the person in your life, they know what you're doing. They know that you're validating. They may have had some skills or some DBT training, and they're telling you, you are not my therapist. Don't do it. How can you validate? What do you do with that? How do you validate them?
You're right.
Validate. Yes, you're right. I'm not your therapist.
No.
You're absolutely right. Thank you for reminding me.
Mm-hmm. Do you still want my help, right?
What?
Go
ahead.
Do you still want my help? Do you want to continue this discussion or not? Right?
And I am your mother. And you're right. I am validating you now. You got it. You figured it out. You figured it out. I am validating you now. And because you know so much about validation, you know that I'm only validating things I truly believe are valid. And I believe what I just said about X, Y, and Z is completely valid. And before, I wouldn't have mentioned it because I was so busy focused on other things, but now I see the validity. And I just would want to communicate that to you. And sorry if I sound like a therapist or I'm awkward. I'm not used to this yet. And, I may seem a little therapeutic about it. I apologize.
I'm not perfect yet. I'm practicing these skills. Thanks for letting me practice those types of responses. That's a good one.
Does that help?
Oh, I think that was great. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Tina, please chime in if you have anything to add.
Okay.
Yep.
This validation takes a village, as you all know.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, yeah.
One question that's here is, what if I'm worried that validating my loved one's efforts, such as continuing to spend time and energy getting a job, despite not being able to keep one, reinforces an effective behavior? I don't think validating will reinforce ineffective behavior. That's just my opinion, though. I'm not a therapist, right? As we just discussed in the last question. But I think validating their effort is valid, right? Is a good thing to do. Now, if their efforts are one job application every week, maybe get curious and not, like, my dad was notorious for, how many college applications did you submit today? It was about how many. So maybe don't be the drill instructor parent that some of us have had, but be curious, right? Be curious, not judgmental, as Ted Lasso says.
Wow. He must have had some DBT.
Oh man, it's really good. Yeah. So I don't know. That one came from anonymous, so I'm not sure if that answered the question. Hopefully it did. And then let's see. Can you both see the other questions here? Next one. Today, my daughter told me she is not going to see a therapist as her medical doctor recommended. I validated to her that she thinks it's pointless. What's a good way to tell her how I feel about it? I feel the therapy is necessary, but I simply validated her without sharing my urgency for her to get help. 24, doesn't live at home. Yeah, it's hard when you're not seeing results right away, right? Therapy is not easy. Therapy is challenging, and it's not easy to get there, maybe, right? Validate the valid parts of it. Right? Is it far from home? Is it difficult to get there? Do they have to take, 3 different buses or something like that? You can validate the difficulty of the task or the efforts made. If she's just simply saying, I don't want to do it because I don't want to do it, it's a little bit more challenging to validate just because she thinks it's pointless. But validate that she's not seeing results yet. See, Doreen's joined us now. Nancy still might have more into
And
that
get
one.
curious, get curious as to why, the thinking behind it. And then you can validate anything that's valid about that, like Roger said. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. I'll jump to the bottom one. My daughter is so self-destructive. It's hard to validate her effort to hurt herself. Absolutely. Right. You're not validating. You don't want to validate an effort to hurt herself. You want to validate her feelings that led to that. Right. The feeling of, wow, you must really be, in deep, deep distress right now if you're hurting yourself. You validate that. You don't want to validate the actual effort that she's taking to do whatever it is she does to hurt herself. So I would say that's that part of it, right? The self-destruction is very difficult to deal with. And safety first, right? That comes up a little later in the presentation, even tonight. But yeah, safety first, right? If they're doing something to harm themselves, be willing and let them know that you're willing to call the authorities.
When I would see cuts on my daughter, I learned to not react to the cuts per se, but to find out what was behind them. Oh, honey, what happened? Oh, that must have been hard. Then what happened? And then what happened? And then she would tell me the sequence of events up to the point she cut. And I would validate everything I could, except obviously the cutting. And then that would, over time, lead us to be able to discuss what could have been done in that moment before the cutting. And that wasn't right away. That was a process. But yeah, at first I would react to the cuts, not to her. So, all right, well, let's continue on, and we will answer more questions along the way.
Yes.
So thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Yes. So just a few tips, right? For taking the other person's perspective. This is huge in every aspect of life, right? Whether you're in a role in customer service, or whether you're dealing with a BPD loved one, or whether you're selling something, you always want the other person's perspective, right? You need to let them know what's in it for them. The everyone's favorite radio station, WIIFM, right? What's in it for me? Because if they don't know what's in it for them to keep the communication going, that makes it more difficult. So remember the foundation again. This is someone you love. It's your family member. It's whether it's your parent, brother, sister, whatever it happens to be, right? Whoever it happens to be, it's someone that you love. And then empathy.
I would just like to add one more thought there, Roger.
Yep.
And if it's not somebody that you're feeling love for, okay, because maybe you're not. It is somebody that you are in a relationship with. You've decided to stay in a relationship with for whatever reason, and there's the motivation there to keep the relationship going for your reasons. Maybe they're not love. Maybe there's something else.
Good. So then the empathy, right? It's the understanding and validating. it's communicating that you really are empathetic with them. You're not just sympathizing. You're not just patronizing them. You're truly there with them in their situation. And then the reality acceptance. We all talked about radical acceptance, reality acceptance, what is versus what should be. Getting rid of the shoulds is huge, right? We don't want the shoulds. Because we all should, we all have ideas of an ideal, but it's what is. And then if you're making the effective assumptions, that in turn promotes the effective behavior, right? So if you're modeling valid or good behavior, or not good, right? Good's a judgmental word, right? If you're modeling effective behavior and someone learns from that, that's going to help. And then the magic formula, right? And this goes to answer a few of those questions that I didn't mention because I knew it was coming here, but the 3 validating statements in a row, because that'll stop the escalation, right? The three in a row is so helpful. The easy one that we do in class is the chemistry test, right? So I'm going to fail my chemistry test tomorrow. So what's the invalidating statement? No, you'll do fine. You're going to be great. You're a great student. You'll be fine, right? That's the invalidating statement. But if you can get 3 in a row, positive validating, actual validating statements, you can de-escalate, right? So what's one of them? Oh, chemistry. That was a really hard class for me too, right? Is there anything I can help you with? Can I help you study? That's 2. And anybody else have a third one to throw in there? No. So, yeah, chemistry is hard. I agree with you. Is there anything I can help you with? Maybe even what topics are you studying? Maybe I know something about it. So if you give 3 in a row, it slows down the escalation. And that's a really kind of, maybe level 1 example, right? That's not a serious, someone's harming themselves issue, but just the 3 in a row helps to stop the escalation. And the formula that Alan gives, it's VVVT, right? So a validation, 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 and then a truth, right? So give the truth of, if you've studied, hopefully it's, stuff that you've covered, things like that. So there's the 3 in a row. And here's just a couple things to keep in mind as you go through these. It does not mean you agree, right? So my daughter doesn't say, oh, your hair's falling out. I noticed that, right? But that would be the exact opposite of validation. But it's the communication of the empathy. So it's not agreeing, it's validating the experience or the parts of their feelings that are true or validating, or are valid rather. And then it doesn't mean problem solving either, right? Validating is just validating their feelings or their behaviors, what's going on right now, the true parts of it. It's not getting to the problem solving, but it helps get to the problem solving later. And it's not play gating, it's not just saying something to get them to stop talking to you, right? That would be very invalidating, to just try to say, oh, yeah, great. It's not about the nail either, right? Everybody remembers that video. So it's not giving in, but it's just being there to listen to. And then validate yourself too. And that's kind of the crux of it. You've got to validate yourself just like you would someone else. And it's not always easy, right, to validate our own efforts, especially when we're dealing with someone that hurt themselves again, or is not able to find a job, or however things are going, or if it's our parent and they, just aren't able to get things together, they're struggling with addiction. Those things are really hard to validate. The part to validate there is just, you must be going through a really tough time right now.
Thank you, Roger.
Yes.
Are you going to do my slides for me?
Sure.
Good. And we'll have more time to answer questions along the way. So yes, we will get through this. So Roger kind of teed it up here for me about self-validation and invalidation. So what is self-invalidation? Can you guys chat some examples of self-invalidation when it comes to your loved one? Like, what are some things that you say to yourself that may be invalidating? Some things that come to my mind are, I blew that. I should have known better. Why did I try? Why did I give in to her when I told myself I wasn't? I'm so weak. Those defeated kind of negative things that we tell ourselves. And I can't really see chat right now. So if Tina or somebody wants to call those out, that would be great. But those are all the ways, a million times a day, some of us can be very invalidating to ourselves. And for those of us who may have had a parent with BPD, or maybe just a particularly critical parent, you may have actually internalized the invalidation you got as a child, and maybe that's just, the way of your thinking, and you continue to invalidate yourself. Maybe you don't even know what you're feeling because you were told you shouldn't feel that way, or you tell yourself you shouldn't feel a certain way. So, all of the techniques that Roger reminded us of to validate our person, okay, and others in our lives, turn them to yourself, okay? Turn them into you, give them to yourself, even practice on yourself first, okay? So that sounds like it makes sense. I gave in to her. She asked me for 2 straight hours for this thing and wouldn't give up. And I'm only human. It makes sense that I gave in. No wonder I'm sad. This is very hard. This is very hard. Or I tried my best and I wish it had turned out better. So again, all of these things we can use on ourselves because there are real negative consequences of not validating ourselves or of invalidating ourselves. When we're being invalidating to ourselves, we can't cope, okay? We have a hard time coping. We can't use our skills. Here you are learning, validation. You have to validate yourself that you can validate. It reduces our coping mastery. It hurts our relationship. It makes us feel horrible inside with depression, guilt, shame. It decreases our physical health, really. And it keeps us emotionally vulnerable so that the next time something happens with our person, we're just not up to speed. We just don't have our skills to cope. We're kind of down ourselves. So there are negative consequences to self-invalidation. So Roger, slide 11. So how can we stop invalidating ourselves? Well, first, we need to use mindfulness and be aware that we're actually invalidating ourselves. For many of us, it's actually second nature. And we start believing that our invalidations are true. We don't even challenge them. We don't even realize that we're invalidating ourselves. And second, take yourself seriously. Okay? Your feelings, your wants, your desires, and your thoughts. Allow yourself to feel what you feel, assuming you've gotten into your primary emotion. Allow yourself to want what you want and think what you think without judgment. I wish my daughter would have come to Thanksgiving with the rest of the family, and it makes sense. I'm sad about it. That's a validating statement instead of, I should have realized she wouldn't come. She never does. I don't know why I got myself all, worked up and hopeful about it. That's invalidating. You want what you want. You want your daughter to come to Thanksgiving, or you wanted Thanksgiving to be different than it was. That's valid. I'm afraid he's going to fail at his job and end up asking me for money again. It makes sense that I feel that way because he lost his last 2 jobs. So it makes sense I'm having this thought. Okay. I don't want to spend time with her because she yells at me and tells me I'm a terrible sister. Okay. That thought is valid if she has been telling you you're a terrible sister when you're with her. So not wanting to spend time with her is a valid desire. Okay. You can validate yourself and even pretend that you're talking to your best friend. Okay. When you're talking to your best friend and they're telling you these stories, most likely you would not say, yes, you really blew it and you are weak, or you're so weak. I mean, you probably wouldn't be best friends with them if they did speak to you that way. More like your best friend would say something like, you tried hard and you must be sad that it didn't turn out better. No wonder you don't want to call your mom since she keeps telling you what a crappy son you are. All right. So what you would say to your best friend, say it to yourself. Your feelings, wants, desires are all valid. Next slide, Roger. One of the most important ways we can invalidate ourselves, validate ourselves. One way we can validate ourselves is to figure out what our own limits are and to start observing them. This is how we can maintain our self-respect under very difficult circumstances. So let me just remind everybody that many of us often slip into using the term boundaries when we talk about limits. And you'll notice that in Family Connections, we don't use that term because it can, 2 reasons. It can set off strong emotional responses in our person because sometimes it can be tied to their fear of abandonment. This is a boundary. You cross it, we're done. And actually, the term boundary is not an accurate description, since the boundary really sets the image of a stone wall that once it's set, it can't be changed. And limits, on the other hand, are more flexible and fluid, depending on circumstances, and they can be extended or relaxed based on your own needs. Your needs. So when you think about speed limits and how they shift depending on the road conditions and other factors, there's not just one speed limit. Well, that's a road, and here's the speed limit, no matter where you're driving. Okay, there's a huge range, and on the same road, it can be between 5 and 75 miles per hour. So just remember, these are our limits reflecting what we will and can accept depending on the conditions of the road, meaning the conditions of us and our life and our circumstances. They're about us and our needs, and we try to express them in that way. Instead of, you must come home by midnight or else, it might be something more along the lines of, when you come home after I've gone to sleep, it wakes me up. And at work the next day, I have trouble concentrating. So I will be locking the door, the deadbolt at midnight tonight. So you see kind of the difference in there. So and in terms of extending and contracting your limit, which kind of goes against some conventional thinking about this, an example is I set a limit with my daughter a few years ago that if she, excuse my French, called me a bitch or said that I was a terrible mother in the midst of an argument, that I would be leaving the conversation until she could not say those words to me. And we had a few fits and starts, but she basically, after a few times of me leaving, she stopped doing that. And then about 6 months later, we got into a heated argument and she used the B word. So in that moment, I had a decision. Was I going to hang up the phone? And I decided I was going to stay in the conversation because her behavior had really improved for 6 months. And my tolerance had frankly increased, because I didn't feel so beaten down by her. So that's a situation where I stretched my limit. So how do you identify your limits, your particular limits? And this is not a one size fits all. I wish I had a sheet printed and I could send it to you and say, okay, everybody, here are your limits, go. But I can't do that. It's highly, highly personal. Nobody can dictate your limit, though I'm sure people have tried to dictate your limit. I know they've tried to dictate my limit. How can you let her talk to you that way? I can't believe you cook a separate meal for your daughter when she comes over. That's ridiculous. I would never do that. My kids know that, you eat what I make or go hungry. All right, well, great. That's your limit. Glad you figured it out and it works for you, obviously. I don't mind cooking a second meal because I'd rather us all sit down and eat together than not. And I don't mind cooking. So different strokes, different limits for different folks. All right. This is about being mindful of what goes on inside of you. All right. When my daughter would start saying that I was an awful mother, I got mindful about it and realized that I would lose my temper and stop using my skills and things would just swirl down from there. Okay. It triggered in me some shame and guilt for causing her BPD. Now, that is not justified shame and guilt, and it's something I'd work through. And so her saying that would kind of bring up that emotion and I would lose my cool. So I decided I could not tolerate this anymore. It was too painful and was hobbling my growth as a person. So I communicated this to her using a dear man, which we'll get into shortly. And I did it when we were calm and regulated. And I thought it out ahead of time. So there may be things that you decide when you get mindful, okay, and you think, okay, that bothers me. Is this going to be a limit setting thing? Once you kind of go through the process, you may decide, you know what, I can tolerate this for now. Yes, it bugs me. Yes, I don't like it. Yes, it's annoying, but I can tolerate that. Let's say your husband purchases, tons of stuff online and packages are arriving all day and you work from home. Okay. And then all this stuff gets put in the closet and it's all cluttered. So what you can do is you can validate that, yes, this is frustrating. All right. This is frustrating to you. And then you can kind of decide if you want to ignore it for now or deal with it because maybe you have more important issues to address than packages arriving. Maybe you just need to keep some peace in your house for this moment. But you could decide to just tell him that it bothers you and why. I work from home, honey, 5 times a day. The doorbell rings, the dog barks. It's really, hurting my work and blah, blah. But you don't have to observe a limit about it. You can just express it and see what happens. So that's your decision to make, whether you're going to set a limit on something or not. Next slide. The most important thing to remember about figuring out your limits is to be in your wise mind. Most of us cannot do this in the moment. We're too jacked up, we're too upset, distracted. And if your person is pushing you to make a decision on a limit in the moment, and I am speaking from personal experience, I need to know now. You got to tell me now. Remember this formula, very similar to the formulas that Roger said. No, validate, no, validate, no, validate. Okay, so here's an example. I know you want an answer right now, and I need a few hours to decide. I know how anxious you are about paying this bill, and I still need time to decide. Yes, I wish I had an answer for you right now, and I will have an answer for you after 4. Okay? Want a cup of tea while I'm deciding? So that's the formula. You say it in different ways, you'll get creative. No, I'm not going to answer you, and I understand how frustrating it is. Next slide. Be a broken record like I just showed you, all right? We don't have money to pay more traffic fines. Yes, I know you may lose your license this time and it will disrupt your life. You know, I know you're angry at me for not handing over the money, and we don't want to pay your traffic fines right now. Yes, I can see how it would make this problem go away, and we aren't going to do it. All right. So that was the 3 times. Now, one of the things as a side note is after this, you can offer to problem solve if appropriate. Okay. And if you want me to help you call the DMV to see if they have a payment plan, I can help you find the number. If you want to take a driving course to take down the fee, I can help you do some research. Just let me know. So notice how this isn't problem solving. It's an offer to help them solve it if they choose. Okay. So does that make sense? Do you guys have any questions about this? I know this is a lot, but it's super key. I also want to give you one more example on not giving in. Try not to give in once you've set your limit. And you can if the circumstances change. If your spouse comes to you and says, well, I got 3/4 of the money to pay my fines, and I just need another $50. Can you help me? You may decide to help him because he showed that he got 3/4 of the money. That's up to you. But that's an example of how you could stretch your limit if you decide you want to. Okay, next slide. Okay, so it's not the other person's job to take you into consideration. It's your job. This says it all about setting limits. It puts you first, checking in with yourself and observing limits that honor your values while still maintaining your relationship mindfulness. Okay, when we actually look after ourselves, our needs and emotions, it has the added benefit of you being in a stronger position to help your person. When we feel used and beaten down and in a weakened state, we're no good. When we honor ourselves, we can be there for our person and for ourselves for the long haul. So any questions about setting limits? And then I'm going to do a quick Dear Man, and Roger and I are going to do a little role play. I haven't seen the chat in the Q&A, so somebody just call it out.
Yeah, there are a few here. There's one question. Today, my daughter told me she is not going to see a therapist as her doctor recommended. I validated to her that she thinks it's pointless. What's a good way to tell her how I feel about it? I feel the therapy is necessary, but I simply validated her without sharing my urgency for her to get help. 24 and does not live at home.
I think you'll be better equipped to answer that when we do Dear Man. This is a good, I don't know if you're going to have a limit around that, because it sounds to me not like it's something you probably can't control in terms of forcing her to go. But you certainly can tell her your feelings about it, and as long as you're coming from your primary emotion, of, I'm guessing fear. But we can't really set limits on things we can't control. And my guess is you can't control her going to therapy.
Next one, a little bit more challenging in my mind here. How do you validate harm or prior trauma you've caused before your apology is accepted? So you're right, that apologies, if you're apologizing, they don't always get accepted, right? And that's something to validate yourself about, right? You've apologized, you've done what you can, and you cannot control their reaction to that.
Well, you answered
it. Can I add a thought on that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Of course.
I'll put it real quick. Because this is common, and I know in my life and other people's lives. There is a time that you were not skillful, and you may have caused some invalidation or some trauma, not knowing that there was another way to do things. And so what can you say? And I go back to, I wish I could go back and change that. Of course, I didn't want to hurt you. And sometimes whatever is going on, if it's a trigger, if it's around the holidays, and we've had some really hard holidays, it seems to come back up every Thanksgiving, or, it comes back up on their birthday. And I think as the family member, it can get, it can kind of get self-invalidating, where it's like, I already answered this. I already said I was sorry. When is it going to be kind of enough? And I guess my, answer or my thought is, sometimes you just have to sound like that broken record. I wish I could go back and change it. And I love you, and move forward from there. I don't know if that was helpful, but I can relate. I can so relate to that.
I can too. Thank you, Tina.
Sure.
And next one goes along with the slide that's on the screen in my mind here. I am not sure this is self-invalidation, but I often feel when my person self-harms that I could have done more to validate them before they self-harmed. Like I have to be on call all the time. So when they are having a dysregulated moment, I have to swoop in and validate. And when I don't get there in time, they self-harm. So yeah, that's it goes along with both limit setting and this slide, right? You take you into consideration also, right? You don't want anyone to self-harm. But the fact that you didn't get there in time, it's really easy to take that on as blame, and that is self-invalidation on some level. So how do you get around that is the real question, I think, right? So if you could be,
can you really be there 24/7 for anybody, anytime? I mean, let's be honest.
Right. Yeah. If you can be everywhere all the time, you're not human, right? So being human, we can't do everything all the time. And it's hard, right? When you've got someone hurting themselves on a regular basis, and you take all the knives away and they break a frame and get glad, sorry. It's hard.
And this is where we go to radical acceptance. Radically accepting you can't be there all the time, and there are going to be times that she self-harms, and or maybe. So radical acceptance combined with self-validation here. And I would also say to you that the more you get into a validating stance, the more it becomes automatic. I see my daughter's name on my phone. I'm like automatically in a validating stance. Boom, I'm there. I'm ready. Hi, honey. Validation queen. But it took me a long time to get there. But now I'm there. It flows a lot easier as you practice. Very important. Okay, so let's go on. We just have a couple more slides, and then we'll do our role play and take more questions. All right, so I am not going to get too deep into the weeds on Dear Man because lucky you all, this Wednesday in Live a Skillful Life series, we've got Kelly Gines, I'm not sure how to pronounce her last name, I apologize, who is a social worker and a DBT expert who's going to spend an hour on how to use Dear Man. So please sign up for that webinar if you haven't already. Roger and I will do a Dear Man role play for you, illustrating this skill. And I want you all to grade us, okay? So here's how you're going to grade us. This is what I want you to watch for when we do our role play. And poor Roger, he's in the validating, he's in the, I get to play the loved one. So D, did we describe the situation concisely and without judgment? E, did we express our feelings and opinion about the situation? A, did we ask for something specific that we wanted? R, did we reinforce what's in it for our person if they comply with our request? M, were we mindful and focused on our objective, like broken record? Did we appear confident and have good body language? Did we seem like maybe we would be willing to negotiate if possible? Next slide. Were we gentle in our approach? Did we seem interested in the person and what they had to say? Did we validate the valid? Did we have an easy manner? Did we seem fair in what we were asking? Did we avoid apologizing at all for our limit? Did we stick to our values? And did we tell the truth without exaggerating? So those are the criteria. We're going to stop share and I guess spotlight both of us. And we will confess we didn't really rehearse. So this will be an on off the cuff ish. So be kind, you all. But okay, so Roger, you want to set up the situation?
Sure. So my daughter had been at residential treatment, and then she was in another facility. And the first time she came over to our house, she immediately went up the stairs to her old room, which was also now her brother's room, not her room anymore. But she went straight up to her room, scared the bejesus out of us because we didn't know what was going on, right? We didn't know what she was there looking for. We didn't know what she was trying to find. And it scared us, right? So that was the basic situation. It was the first time she had been to our house in just about a year, right? From when she left home to the first time she visited afterwards, it was almost a year. And we had seen her in between, obviously, but not here. So it was a very challenging situation and we were scared. That was our emotion, right? So that's our skill. So then I am going to give Nancy, my lovely daughter, the Dear Man here. So when you came over the other night, you went straight to your room. You hadn't asked for permission. You just went straight up. And we were scared. We didn't know what you were looking for. We would like in the future if you can ask permission before going upstairs in the house. And if you do ask permission, that'll be, that'll lean towards us trusting you more for other things too.
Are you kidding me? That's my room. Why do I have to ask permission? I never had to ask permission before.
That was your room for a long time. It was, that's true. And we know that you might have some things in there that you still want to get. We just want you to ask permission next time before you go into your room.
Oh my God. You guys have so many stupid rules. Like when did this is ridiculous. You're such control freaks. My God.
We are trying to keep you protected. We didn't know what you were looking for in there. We were afraid.
I'm just looking for my makeup. I can't come in and get my makeup.
If that's what you wanted, no problem. We just want you to ask ahead of time.
Oh my God. Mom is still paranoid. Is this mom?
This is both of us, absolutely both of us. We were scared, and we want you to be comfortable, and we want you to get what you need. We don't want to be afraid, though, either, for ourselves.
What are you afraid of?
Well, this is a place where some bad things happened to you in the past, and we know that, we just want to keep you safe.
I just got out of residential. I'm fine now. I just want to be able to walk into my room whenever I want. I'm 18 years old. I guess mommy and daddy for permission. Is that what I have to do? Ask you guys for permission?
Because since you're not living here and because we're worried about you, yes, we want you to ask permission. Does it sound like a difficult thing to ask permission?
It's actually kind of embarrassing. Can I text you? Because when I'm with my boyfriend, that is just so embarrassing that I have to ask my mommy and daddy if I can go in my room. So can I text you and you can tell me a text?
Yeah, when you're over, you can take us aside if you'd like. You can send us a text, however you want to communicate that, as long as we know, or you can just pull us aside. We can go up there with you if you like.
All right. Okay. I get it. You guys are weird. I'll do whatever you want. All right. Texting is fine. Fine.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah. She would do that too, actually.
All right.
So
I want you all to grade us. How do we do? Did that sound anything like anything in your life?
Pull that back. Should I pull the criteria back up again here?
Sure. My son would get up and leave. Okay. Yep. That.
Yep.
My person would not have backed down so easily. Yep. That's all true. My daughter would tell us to F off. Okay.
Yep.
Good. Thank you. Thank you for saying that. So if I had said, Roger, if I had said, you guys are just effing a-holes.
You might be right.
You might be right. Yeah. So that is a time when you don't want to get derailed. Right. Okay. You may have to put some of your limits aside and stay that broken record, because if you go off on the effing train, you know where you're going to end up. So stay on your train, ignore the F-bombs to the best of your ability, ignore you're horrible and awful and whatever, and stick with the thing.
No. And Mandy, to answer yours, it's not always that easy, right?
Oh, no.
This particular one, my daughter actually understood. She had come from residential, and she actually was easier on us than Nancy was right now in that particular. But for years before that, she was way more abusive and confrontational. So it does take practice. It takes, over and over and over. So yeah, that I totally get that.
Walking out, okay, or the clicking of the phone, screw you. That can be a text of, I could tell you, you weren't ready to talk about this. I get it. We can continue this conversation another time.
Yep.
That way you keep the door a little open. They know, all right, this isn't a done deal just because I walked out. They're going to come back to me. Okay. So that's what you kind of throw as they're walking. I see, you're not ready to talk about this. We'll get back to it another time. Slam. So let's see. My daughter would curse and blame me for all her problems. Yes. And that is where you don't get derailed and you say, I know you're upset about the way you were raised. I know that, you're saying Dad and I caused all your problems. And I'm just asking for you to let us know before you go upstairs.
Nancy, just to add to that is we often call it being a broken record in family connections that, they may want to bring in, it's kind of like a tornado just sucking in everything around it. So you're talking about the room, but yet, or whatever situation you may be doing, those of you out there may be addressing, And as they are bringing all this other stuff up, you go, yes, I know, but right now we're just talking about the room, like just keep bringing it back and pushing away all the other extraneous things they're pulling in and just pulling it back to the subject that you're talking about. Thank you.
And somebody brought up the word permission. This is why you craft your dear men ahead of time. You think it through and you practice, because if you hear yourself and you're like, oh God, they're going to not like that permission word, then you come up with a different word. Now, for Roger, that word worked because it wasn't a trigger for his daughter. But this is why you don't do dear man, especially in the beginning, on the fly. So, and again, everybody's talking about, the F-bombs and all of that. Just understand you stay on your road for getting this out. And it is a process. You might have to revisit it, but the process was started with that conversation. Any other comments or questions about Dear Man, Give Fast, or anything? We have about 10 minutes left, and we're happy to. Somebody said, was Roger setting a boundary or a limit? I did discuss the difference, and we don't really set boundaries in Family Connections. We set limits that are flexible, like speed limits.
That was an example I answered too. That was an example, dear man, not an example of limit setting.
We just gave you an example of a dear man. Yeah. And as you can see, a dear man, or as you remember, a dear man uses all of your skills. Okay. You needed to set your limit. You needed to have a lot of self-validation. You needed to have a lot of relationship mindfulness. You needed to be able to validate them when they're slinging F-bombs at you. There are many, many skills you use in a dear man, which is why it is really one of the very last things that we teach, because it uses it all. And you see how he negotiated too, when I'm like, I don't want to ask my mommy and daddy, and can I text you? And he was like, sure, or you can just do a private, privately. I think that took a tiny bit of steam.
Yeah. And I had more ammunition too, right? That room is where she used to self-harm. And that was our fear, right? So what was being solved is our fear being alleviated, right? That's one of the questions that came up.
Yeah. All right. Any other questions that we did not get to? I'm depending on our moderator to help us with that.
It was early on. I don't think we answered it yet, though. What if your validation skills are impaired by another mental health condition, such as ADHD? I hope you can understand that a neurological ADHD tune out can feel to others like I don't care. And it's very hard to validate how my own ADHD frustrates my BPD partner when I invariably tune out, both in the everyday and in validation skills itself. And it looked like Tina was going to answer.
Yeah, so I would say at first, for sure, validate yourself. That this is hard for you, and that sometimes you tune out. And when you're when you are regulated about it, you can validate them and their frustration with you and the tuning out, and maybe come up with a creative solution for when you tune out. When you, I know, honey, it's hard. I don't even hear anything when I'm in that mode. Could you, tap me on the shoulder? I want to be there for you. And I just have this terrible habit, and I'm trying hard. So that's where you own what you've done in the past and validate how frustrating your issues are, and try to get creative together on how you both can get your needs met. I know that all sounds easy, and it's not.
Yeah, no, none of it is.
But start with self-validation.
Yeah. And the negotiating skills too, right? I feel that one of the questions I'm going to answer as I talk here, I feel like I can't show any vulnerability to my daughter because she is either 0 or 100. There's no compromising with her. the negotiating takes a lot of practice too, right? Nancy was pretty easy on me, right? I didn't have to get into any detailed, discussion. I was able to, just show the example. But when there's no compromising, it's just try the validating over and over, right? The 3 at a time, try to get those statements that will kind of land with her. And it's, once again, it takes practice, and it'll take practice to figure out which ones might work better with someone that's either 0 or 100, because that, we've certainly been there, the 0 to 100 thing. So we've come a long way. We're not there anymore, but we were there for a long time.
Yeah, and here's an example. So I try, when I talk to people about limit setting and Dear Man, I try to encourage you to do it in situations where you have control. Okay, you can walk out of the room, you can hang up the phone, you can lock the door, because this is like, if she had said, hell no, I'm going to walk in here and go up those stairs anytime I want, and let's say she did it, she walked up a couple times and self-harmed or did whatever she wanted to do, she broke your limit. The next time the Dear Man would be, well, we asked you to do blah, and you did, the opposite. And so, Mom, just know your door is going to be locked, and we're happy to unlock it for you when you ask permission. So that's kind of the next level that you don't want to start at, but you may have to go to. And once you start asking permission, we can take the lock off the door.
There you
go. Anything else?
Nancy, or if you can expand upon it, or I'll just say it, is that we want to really reinforce that validation is just a way to take the temperature down. It's not a problem solving skill. It's not a problem management skill. You can't negotiate, compromise, discuss, rationalize, with someone who's irrational. So validation has to happen first to help bring that temperature down. You can only do these Dear Mans and limit settings with someone who's regulated. And so that's why you want to choose the time to do those things. So I don't know if you want to expand upon that, Nancy. Because a lot of these questions keep saying, well, how do you do, in these situations when things are escalated, how do I tell them not to do that? But that's not the time to do it. It's beforehand or afterwards. Please
tune in Wednesday when she will be doing an hour-long on Dear Man, and you will get more in depth on that, and you'll be able to ask her the more problem-solving questions. This module was really about, again, validating our person, validating ourselves, and as part of validating ourselves, figuring out what our limits are and starting to observe them. We just introduced Dear Man at the end of Module 5. You will be getting more into it. Module 6, I believe, is in January. Is that right, Tina? And also with the webinar on Wednesday. So just practice validation right now, because as you can see, validation is the key to helping problem solving be successful. All right. And it's really, really, really tricky. I want to validate that. It is tricky.
Someone had a comment, if you could go back and just review the power of 3, validate, no, validate, 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 validate. Like if you're saying no, to something.
Right. So when my loved one, wants me to make a decision right away, I can validate that. I get it. You want a decision right now. It would really reduce your anxiety. And I'm not ready to give that to you. So that's the no. So I validated her, like, what are you telling me you can't? I want a decision now. I get it. It would really help you if I were able to give you an answer now, and I can't. And then she'll say, well, then why can't you? What's wrong with you? You know, you're such an idiot. You know, well, you know, I wish I had the answer. I wish it too. And I'll have an answer for you at 4 after I talk to Dad. Why do you always have to talk to Dad? You guys are so blah, 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 blah. You know, why can't you make a decision on your own? What's wrong with you? I thought you were a feminist. You know, yeah, I know. And it's both of our money. And so we both have to, we both have to talk to it, you know, about it. But yeah, I get how that seems a little weird, but okay. You know, 4 o'clock. So that's about 3 validations and 3 no's. I did not change my position at all. And I didn't say no. Actually, I didn't say no.
Super.
And as Doreen is pointing out, there's another concept of 3 with just validating 3 times. Or 5 times or 10 times in a row. One validating statement is usually not going to bring to somebody down who's highly dysregulated. Validate, 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 validate. Keep saying validating statements, okay? And usually it takes 3 for you to notice a difference and them to feel it.
Yeah, I think this person in the chat, I know there's a video or a book or something. It's about validation, about truth or something. I know there's something out there. That's not family connections.
Concept, Doreen, he did mention it. Do you want
okay.
to expand on that at all, Roger? The validate truth?
Yeah, it is in the teaching notes from the
Yeah, I
class.
looked
So
in the teacher's notes. I didn't see that. But anyway, if it's
yeah,
new,
it just helps with the dysregulation, right? It brings it down if you do the 3 in a row. It's just another way to say the more times, right? So it's validate truth. And if you can get that in there, you want to interject the truth about an experience after you've given the 3 validations, right?
Well, thank you, everybody, so much. Hopefully, this was helpful, reminded you of many of the skills that you already heard about. And I just want to validate that we all need reboots. All of us who are immersed in it all the time need reboots. That's why many of us just keep leading. It keeps us in it. So thank you. You're welcome, everybody. And thank you for showing up. And I hope you guys can make it on Wednesday. If not, register and that will put you on the list to get the recording.
Yes, and I made a mistake. We are doing the skills reboot for module 6 in December. So I put that in the chat. It's going to be Tuesday, December 14th, and you will receive an email with information about our December program. So you'll be able to register. And thank you so much, Nancy and Roger, for doing this today, and for all of you that have attended and participated. We're so happy that you are that you're here and you're still engaged and still living a skillful life. So thank you all. We appreciate it.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thanks.